Kia ora everybody, welcome to the session. We're going to do this a little bit differently from the other sessions, purely because I don't have much presentation skills. So what I'm going to do is just talk for a few minutes from a client point of view, and then I'm going to hand over to pretty much our vendor, which in this case is Inov8, and our designer, which is Nikki. We will take questions and answers as we go through, and we'll have some at the end as well. We know that this is a very late session and you've all got your mind on Vegas now, so we'll try and wrap it up early. We do have some prizes to give away. I don't know how we're going to give them away, but
best dancer. No, I'm just
best questions will be rewarded with a prize, but also if we have any medium-sized ladies, you pretty much quids in because most of the t-shirts are that size. I found that out this morning when I went to put on my own t-shirt and realised it was a medium-sized ladies and it had a big boat neck and it was very tight around here. Women's t-shirts are not the same as men's t-shirts, it seems. Why it's taken me all these years to find that out, I don't know. But I'll kick off and I'll just talk about the PSA for a couple of minutes so you get a flavour of who we are and how our SharePoint sort of development setup is. We pretty much run SharePoint out of our communications team. So our IT team don't support it. They've always seen it as a communications tool. So we've only got a very small IT team anyway. We've got 130 staff across 9 or 14 offices, depending on how you split it. We have what's called Lone Rangers, who sit outside of our main offices. So we can cover places like Greymouth and Northland. But we have about 4 people in our IT team, 4 people in our communications team, and traditionally our IT team have divorced themselves from SharePoint and given it over to the communications team, of which 3 of our members aren't very tech savvy, so I'm pretty much SharePoint at the PSA, and that's why we have partnered with a vendor like Inov8. Other than content, we are not very SharePoint savvy, so that's why I'm going to just talk about the things that we needed from a business point of view, and then I'll hand it over to these guys to talk about the actual implementation and design. So, the PSA, it's New Zealand's largest union. We represent 58,000 workers in 5 sectors. So the PSA is the Public Service Association. That's Te Pukenahere Tikanga Mahi. We have workers not only in the public sector and the state sector, so government agencies, state-owned enterprises. We have members in local government, we have members in DHBs, and we have members in what we call community public services. So that's anything that's government funded, but probably run like an NGO or a charity. So we look after members there, and we do that in a more traditional sense, like a union would, in negotiating new contracts, which we call collective agreements. And I'll just get this jargon out of the way now, because I've just realised that my whole presentation is peppered with union talk. So maybe a prize for someone who spots a bit of jargon, so that would be great. But we also argue for people's interests, so we write submissions with our members, we submit on policies, we turn up to select committees and argue for them in that respect as well. So SharePoint, why do we have it? Basically, we've got so much information, and traditionally, before SharePoint came along, this information was held all over the place. So desk files under people's desks, in bins, in rolling shelves, everywhere that you can imagine information was stored, it was there and elsewhere. There's a story about one year we printed 50,000 membership forms so we could recruit new people, and within a week they were all gone. And so they printed 50,000 more. And no one actually asked, where are these membership forms? Turned out they were in the car boots of every one of our staff members because they had intentions to hand these things out, but never got around to handing them out. So, you know, that's just an example of the sort of chaos that existed at the PSA. So we needed a solution for that, storing our information, and for also having ready access to our people. Those 58,000 members that I talked about are reliant on 130 staff picking up their problems at work, negotiating their contracts, representing them with the employer, or working with them and the employer with the government to change legislation. So having access to people and information is key for us to carry on. and in the past we weren't very good at either of those. So ease of access to our information means better service to members, and better service to members means good word of mouth. Good word of mouth means more members. So that's really simplistic, but no one ever got more customers by doing a bad job. So it's the same for us in the union space. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things that I'm going to talk about quite briefly. These are basically web parts that Inov8 have helped us come up with over the last wee while. I think that some of these were kicked off in 2010, and a couple of them were recently implemented when we went to 2013. So this is Homer. This is the main screen when you first go into the SharePoint solution for the PSA. We don't talk about SharePoint at the PSA. There's no point. Our workforce is pretty much, I won't bag them because they're not here, but I'll say that they have very different approaches to how they use technology to each other. We talk about Homer. I don't know where the name come from. I know that beers were involved, and it's not named after Homer Simpson, and it's not named after the thinker Homer, so I don't actually know any other Homers out there that it could be named after, but I do know there was beers involved. It was going to be called Bruce, but I don't know where that name came from either. But Homer lets us quickly jump into really relevant information. So straight on the home page, we've got our image carousel. And this gives us a visual clue of where the organisation is at any one moment. So currently, we're using it to display membership data. And quite simply, people can click on that carousel and see how our membership is going. I don't know why I chose DHBs, because it's showing you that we're doing really shit there. But it's okay, we're doing really well in public service. So, but in the past, people would go onto our old intranet pre-SharePoint, be able to interrogate our member database, which is based in Sybase, and they'd be able to eventually get a report out, eventually stick it into Excel, and eventually do something that's visual like this. But straight away with the image carousel in Homer, we can whack those straight up there, and people can see the health or the not so healthy membership numbers and do something about it. The other thing that we use this image carousel for is to display any actions that are going on. You know, your traditional unions out on the street with pickets going rah, rah, rah. It's very important for our 9 offices around the country to understand what's happening in Wellington, what's happening in Auckland, what's happening in Christchurch. And so we do use this space as well to put up pictures of those rallies so people can see that all that hard work that they were doing around the country did pay off, or actually it might just be a case of our people in Greymouth knowing that we did have some action out in Wellington, and that might have an impact on them down the line, and they might have to go on the street themselves, and they better start writing their picket posters, and they probably need to phone me to put something on the website. But, so it's just work to create work for myself. I don't know why we bother, to be honest. Every time I show you one of these little web parts, I'm going to finish with a quote from an actual staff member. I would like to have had videos like in Christie's presentation, but that would have been a nightmare, because just to get people in front of a camera for us is a challenge. But this is Odette Shaw. She's our business systems administrator or coordinator. She's just had a job title change. She basically owns every business system in the PSA. So for her, it's about connecting up all the different bits of work that we do industrially, politically, communications, all the way through to legal and IT. She has to connect it all. And so having that image carousel for her has been able to really speed up her job. She's able to say to the people that are in charge of recruitment, shit, that trend with the DHBs going down, we need to rectify that, and this is how we'll do it. Whereas before, it would be month end, run a report. Now you've found out that the organisation's coming unstuck, and by then it's too late because your membership has gone. So this is another web part. This is our on leave web part. This is also on the home screen. 58,000 members relying on 130 staff is a bit of a challenge sometimes. It's even more of a challenge when they phone up or they visit our office and those people are on leave. Prior to having this system, and prior to having other technology like Link and Outlook all joined together, it was hit and miss or hit and hope. A member might call in asking to be put in touch with John, who was working on their personal case because they're being bullied at work. And our call centre would literally blindly put that call through and hope that that person was sitting at their desk. Now with little smart bits like this on leave web part, call centre can have a look at this, and not only can they see who's away, when they're coming back, but if they click on there, they can get this message. It's really pixelated, so I don't know whether you can read that. But they get a quick message of, okay, if Yvonne's away, picking up her women's network responsibilities is Joe Taylor, and picking up her education responsibility is Murray Bean. And for us, this is also linked in with Outlook, so you get those little coloured dots that say that they're busy, they're free, or they're away. So this really adds value for us.
Sorry, quick question. So whereabouts is that information coming from?
So we have an HR system that's built by a company called Fusion 5, and all of our leave is entered into that.
A cup for asking questions.
Oh, first prize. Would you like a woman's t-shirt?
You know something I don't know?
Yeah, so we've got an HR system. It's developed by Fusion 5, and what SharePoint's doing is going away and interrogating that data. So there is more that sits behind this. If you are a member of our call centre, you can go further behind this and log some of that leave as well. And the same with, we don't really have HR, but we have a finance officer who can go in there, log leave for you, whether it be bereavement leave, sick leave, annual leave, or any other type of leave that unions have invented in the last 50 years. And there are quite a lot. That's pretty much the system that we use, and SharePoint's interrogating that data. Yeah. This is Art Daniel. He is what we call an organiser. Organisers make up 90% of our staff. They are the people responsible for talking to regular union members, making sure that they're up to date and know everything about their collective agreements, which is their employment contract, making sure that they are getting put in touch with the right people or answering the problems that he's able to. And he really loves the on leave today thing, because he would have been in the past one of those people that just did that hit and hope, stick a call through, and yeah, you know, we're not big on SLAs or KPIs or anything like that. It's quite anti-union, quite corporate speak, but in the past we have let down our membership in that way, and this web part in itself has helped us pick up our response to members. This is our car booking web part, very similar to a web part that I saw in Christie's presentation that she was using for an event management thing. For us, we could have put all of our cars as assets into Outlook, but as I mentioned earlier, our staff have various levels of technical competence. We needed something that was very visual. We needed something that was immediate, and for our finance company, for our finance team, they need to run a report at the end of the year from an assets point of view of how many miles, where do these things go to. There's heaps of information that they draw down from the back end of SharePoint here. We have 60 staff in Wellington. This is only for Wellington, this car booking system. Across the rest of the country, we give each one of our staff members a car because they actually cover a lot more geographically than our Wellington members. In Wellington, you can pretty much go from our office to the ministry of this, ministry of that, department of this by foot. But for those rare occasions where staff need a car, we have these 3 pool cars to choose from. So 3 pool cars for 60 staff, that could be quite unmanageable. But this car booking web part has made it manageable. Means that we've saved a lot of money. Otherwise, we would have had to go to the model that we do in the rest of the country, which is 1 car per staff member. That we've
yes. Via the reserve now, and then someone authorises it? Or
so we have a very flat structure at the PSA. We don't really have management. We have what is the equivalent of CEOs. We call them. Pretty much, you get in there, you request it. There is, because it's SharePoint and it does need some workflow, it does say, who is this authorised by? You could probably put Mickey Mouse in. If they were in our Active Directory, I don't think they are. But, so we just put somebody else's name in, and yeah, you're good to go.
So then you're gonna, so when they actually put that, when they check it back in, you write the mileage down.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's exactly how it works. So this is Michael Woodcock. He works, as he says there, all the way up to Kapiti and all the way down the terrace. And without the car booking system, he just couldn't do his job. Well, he could, but it cost us a lot more money in cars. Yeah. Or train fares. I think he catches the train every day. Okay, this one looks pretty boring, and it probably is pretty boring or mundane to most people, but this is a health and safety register. Unions are responsible for health and safety, bringing in health and safety legislation in this country. You know, they champion for it long and hard, and some of you may have overzealous health and safety policies at work, and some of you might not. But it's very important. 51 people died in their workplaces last year. That's a pretty crappy stat, considering that New Zealand was one of the first places to implement health and safety.
How are you dealing with competing changes in health and safety legislation coming next year? Are you going to have to spend more money on customising this web part?
No, so the way this register works, it's in line with the health and safety legislation, and it's really about reporting accidents, near misses and incidents, and I think that's the same way that the legislation works in the future as well.
So is that members doing the reporting, or their reps? Or?
So this at the moment is staff only, but we're going to roll it out on our website as well, so they'll have a tool that they can either learn from or replicate. So this is basically a form that members fill in when there is an accident or a near miss or a hazard, and then it populates an area for our health and safety team or a health and safety team, and they can then use workflow to minimise, follow it up. But the great thing is that after someone's filled in one of these forms, it becomes a living sort of hazard notice, because people can see quite clearly that a door is broken in a basement and there's a light out, and this is a really bad scenario. None of this happens. just having a look. You know, the toner dust, that's about as dangerous as it gets in our workplace. But, you know, the idea is that people have a quick visual look at the hazards out there, and it's minimised. And this is Debbie, who's on our health and safety team. She's the coordinator, and not only can we log those accidents quickly, but staff can have a visual clue as to where these hazards are, and hopefully the health and safety team have minimised them and removed the risk long before people see the register.
What about recording once once a particular hazard has been resolved? Because some of the hazards there were pretty old, but they were still there.
Yeah, so we don't ever, and I think this is a reflection of our workplace, having quite a competent health and safety team. We don't generally have lots of hazards, so we haven't had the need to, I guess, stock take that register and remove things yet. We've just left it there as an example. We haven't had that many hazards, luckily, but that might not be the case for most workplaces. Yeah. I guess if we did have more, once they've been resolved, we'd archive, but we haven't yet. This area here, I don't know how much you can see, but this is just a standard, what many people would think is a standard documents library. And for us, this is actually the most used place on our intranet. Agreements, collective agreements, as I said, are the employment contract that exists between PSA members and their employer. We have about 500 employers, and all of these agreements, prior to us having SharePoint, were stored everywhere. When I was talking about that in the bin, under their desk, in rolling shelves, I wasn't actually kidding. What this meant was that at any time we needed to get that agreement, somebody else took over a piece of work from another organiser, meant that couldn't happen. Any learnings from negotiations at Ministry of Justice couldn't be had for the people that worked at Ministry of Education. since we've implemented SharePoint, we put all of those agreements in one place, and not only can we do useful stuff like put a workflow on expiry dates so that our organisers can say 6 months out, get a notification to say you've actually got 5, 6, 7, 8 contracts up for negotiation. We can also use it to do trends analysis, so the path of least resistance. So we can have a look at clauses in these contracts like family violence and say, well, in our negotiations over the last 18 months, no employer resisted putting a family violence clause into a collective agreement. So that for us is an easy win for members. So if they want to be supported for pay equity, we have a look at some of the pay equity clauses that have been put in, and we can say there's not much resistance here. We think we could put this into more collective agreements. It also means that with that trends analysis, we've been able to create a model clause library. I won't show you that, but it's basically pay equity, family violence, anything around holiday pay. We've really valued having all these collective agreements in one place. This is Melissa. She works in what we call CPS, Community Public Services. I think she's the only person that smiled when she had a photo taken. It's honestly not that bad at my place. She works in those CPS organisations, so NGOs, so healthcare providers, aged care providers, disability providers, and she can sort out what's coming up in the next few months, and that really helps with her. That is, I think, the end of my part, and I'm available for questions now or after, and I'll now hand over to Stickney and Nikki, who will take you through how they went about helping us build those things.
Thank you. So the next little bit, I know you all want to rush out for your drinks and things like that, so I'll try and keep it as short as possible. So we just wanted to talk through how we got there and how we worked with PSA to enable the intranet. I just wanted to, before I start, is there anybody in the audience who is responsible for rolling out an intranet? 1, 2, 3. Nikki, can you do me a favor? Give all of these people one of these. Keep your hands up. And is anybody planning to do one in the next 6 months? You get a cup as well because you're planning. All right. Well, while that's going on, so my name is Stickney Kunanagam, and I work for Inov8 in Wellington, and we work with clients, like Matt said before, who haven't got internal a big IT team or resources to be able to build and enable SharePoint intranets. And we work with a lot of clients, and PSA is one of our clients. So what I thought I would do is just very quickly run through the process we take our clients through to make sure that their implementation is successful. I've been involved in a lot of implementations, and the last thing I want to do is work on a project for 6 months that is not going anywhere, and I don't even want to start that project. So basically, we have these fixed phases, and this is not, this is pretty much standard. You all know what these mean. But I just want to touch on a couple of things. So the first phase, where we have the information architecture phase, and the design phase is run by Nikki. And what we do in that phase is we have workshops with the key stakeholders, and we demand that you do have that group of key stakeholders before you start the project. And the key stakeholders is a cross-section of people from your organization. And Nikki will talk to that in a little bit. Once that's done and the design phase is done, we go in through the build phase, which is where our technical people, our technical experts get involved. That's where the rubber hits the road pretty much. And we implement the requirements that come out of that. Of course, you have to test it. Otherwise, you don't want to give it to a client once it's not tested properly. And the UAT phase is also really important because you get the users involved in getting the user acceptance, but also training them through SharePoint content management. So if you had content managers who are going to be part of the new site or a new rollout, it's a great opportunity to bring them in earlier on and use them to do the testing and do the content management. So they're trained, so they don't go freak out when you roll out a new platform. And obviously, implementation is go live and have a few drinks and celebrate that you've done a good job. So I'm just going to hand over to Nikki for the next few slides to take us through the design one, and then I'll wrap up at the end. Yes.
Can you just talk to the IA phase a little bit?
All right. In more detail, Nikki, I'll just go through that, because otherwise we'll run out of time. Yeah, go.
Great, thanks. I'm Nikki. I'm an information architect and visual designer. So essentially my job is to create a framework within an intranet or website so that all the content has a home. That's what we mean by the framework, and from a design perspective, that is putting the lipstick on the pig, working with the marketing and comms department and brand guidelines and ensuring that it looks great. From today, and whether you've been involved in a SharePoint project or not, some of you are starting to realise or know that SharePoint is a very powerful tool in terms of data storage, manipulation, creation of content. But what is the point of all of that if your users of the system can't find that content? So that's where I come in, and this is a really, really important phase of the project. Ours is a user-centred approach, which means users are at the very heart of all of the work we do within the stage. We need to look at their needs, their wants, their motivations, their limitations, and a lot of attention is given to all of that at every single stage of the design process. If you think about an intranet project, more than any other IT implementation, it is driven by users. Users not only create the content, but they manage it, and they also have to find it to be able to complete their tasks on a daily basis. So the meat of the intranet is the content, and we want to make sure that that content is easily found, that it's an intuitive system. So what we do is we take an iterative approach. All the knowledge that we gain from users through the various testing that we do, we re-implement and feed back into the design process to make sure that we have a very successful solution at the end. This doesn't mean that your project has to cost a fortune and take a long time. There are actually some quick and dirty testing mechanisms that we use that can create...
Forget the dirty. Yeah.
That can create and give you some really good insights. So let's talk about a couple of those. Just bearing in mind, when I talk about user testing, I'm actually talking about user research, so not to be confused with the UAT testing that happens further down the track. There are a couple of techniques that we use with most of the projects. This is kind of the order in which we undertake these studies. Content audits are really important and useful for us to understand what content exists, what content doesn't exist but is useful, who's managing that content, how are people finding that content, is it still relevant, and how is that content performing. And essentially, it's quite a time-consuming process. Anybody can do it within an organisation. You're really just putting a huge big list together to ensure that when you do come up with a solution, your solution will encompass all of that content. We also make use of user surveys. User surveys are really a useful tool when you have a lot of users spread across the country, for example, and you can't get to all the offices to do one-on-one interviews. They're also a really good tool to get users to start thinking about their requirements before you actually set up any workshops. So it helps prepare them for that. And we get a lot of interesting user feedback around content quality and relevance, site navigation and usability, design and site cosmetics. Stickney and Matt talked about business requirements. Those we obtain most ideally through stakeholder interviews, and we make sure that by understanding those, that those will actually support the user needs. Those two things need to be married together. The great thing about the stakeholder workshops is that the in-person nature of the workshops provides a relaxed environment, and trains of thought can be fleshed out and discussed as a group. Focus groups are another fantastic tool, and they're really good for getting subjective information from the users. We're able to highlight motivations and perceptions of users, and often you'll find in the focus group scenario that a common language starts to develop, and that really gives you some good insight into the culture of an organisation. Card sorting is a technique. You can get an open or closed card sort, but the one that we most use is an open card sort. Essentially what we do is we take a representative sample of the content that needs to be catered for. We write the content onto very simple index cards, and then we have groups of possibly 4 to 5 users. We ask them to work together. We ask them to speak out loud as much as possible so we can understand the thought processes that are happening. And we get them to sort the cards into groups. And we brief them by saying it would be really great if not only can you think out loud, as I mentioned, but think about this logically. Don't think about how the system works at the moment or how you think it should work. Think about how that content should logically be grouped. So if you were searching for that content, which content do you think logically belongs together? Once they've established some groups, we then ask them to provide a name for that particular group. That leads us to the next slide. Am I going to press the right button?
Yep.
Yeah, I've
Oops.
skipped. Well,
Yep.
that basically, sorry.
Which one are you?
I'm trying to get to that one. So all of this information, you're probably wondering, gosh, is this going to take a lot of time, cost a lot of money, because we're going to have to test heaps of users? You don't. According to NN Group, you really only need to test a maximum of 5 users to account for at least 85% of the problems. It's really interesting when we start talking to users. The first user you talk to will actually highlight a good proportion of the problems. Next user you talk to, you'll find some similarities that the first user came up with, and they might add a little bit more insight, and so it goes. So don't be put off by doing this phase of work because you think it's actually going to take a long time.
Good.
From all the information that we've been able to collect from some or all of the techniques that I've spoken about, we, in the first instance, we put a sitemap together. The sitemap's a really good tool for us to plan the design phase. We work together with the developers of the system, understand any technology constraints that may appear, but essentially what we're making sure of is that all that content that is necessary for the users actually has a home, and that can be represented really well with a sitemap. Once we have the sitemap, we can actually employ an extra round of user testing, and we call that task-based user testing. It's a low-fidelity approach. You can simply draw the sitemap on big pieces of paper. You give the user a task. You generally give them a couple of broad tasks and some very specific tasks. For example, looking at the sitemap, where would you go to apply for leave? They'll tell you what section, and you can provide them with another piece of paper that shows the subsections of that, and gather data that way in terms of validating the information architecture that you've been able to come up with in the first place. I mentioned earlier that when we do card sorting, we ask people to think out loud. And honestly, based on my experience, this is where you get the most valuable data. Sometimes when you put users in a testing environment, they can possibly feel a bit shy or a bit reserved to share certain information. But when you get them in a group setting and they start talking amongst their peers and discussing their problems, and you know, somebody says, oh, I can't find that either, you know, you really get some good insight. So it's very true that some of our most important work is just listening and learning. There's a couple of key points I'd like to share for those of you that are thinking of conducting some user testing within your organisation to enable you to get some good results. First of all, make sure you write a good test. It's really important to have some clear goals right at the start. What are you wanting to understand? Is it how quickly can a user find information? or is it something else? Make sure you understand those goals first. Also make sure you use broad and specific tasks. For example, you could show them the mock-up of the homepage and ask them something as broad as, what do you think? What do you think of the way the information's structured, the content that's available to you on the homepage? And that then opens up a full discussion from which you can learn a lot. And then again, as I mentioned earlier, you can be really specific and ask them to go and find a specific policy document and just track the way that they move through the site to ensure that it's intuitive. The other thing is to provide context up front. So the best way we do this is we first understand what tasks users need to complete on a daily basis in order to do their job most effectively. And we base the test tasks around those. It's also really good to test the instructions on one of your colleagues first, just to make sure that the way you're testing is actually going to work and get you some good results. Be concise. Your staff members, your managers, your stakeholders, whoever you're dealing with, they're busy people. They've got a lot of work on their plate. A great way to get them involved, incentivise. I can't stress enough, incentivise. It could be a movie ticket. It could be a book voucher. Just something to, spur them on to kind of give up their time, get involved. They may be reluctant, but as soon as they get into it, they actually might find it quite fun. Beware of leading questions. I'll often see a manager, for example, say, well, what do you prefer about the new homepage? But the better question to ask would be, how would you compare the two homepages? Which one do you think works better for you? So not leading them down a specific path, letting them give their feedback freely. And finally, take advantage of an open comment session at the end. Ask them if there's anything further that they would like to discuss. Is there something that they don't feel is working particularly well? You can get a whole bunch of information from that. Once the site map's signed off and everybody's happy with the overall framework and making sure that the content has all got somewhere to live and it all makes sense and it's intuitive and easy to use, we start looking at the design, but not really from a colouring in perspective, just in terms of how things sit on the page, how certain pages relate to one another, and how specific functionality works. And we do this through wireframes. Wireframes are a great tool to use because they don't lead anybody in terms of visual design. People can get really caught up on such simple things as fonts and colours, but this is literally black and white simple. I personally use Balsamic. It's a fantastic tool. It's a very low fidelity tool. It's very easy to use. And it really is just a series of boxes and dummy text, but it gives a good indication of what's happening and how it's happening. Next slide is where we do put the lipstick on the pig. Now, we've seen a couple of SharePoint sites through this conference. You've all obviously been to different sessions, but my attitude is it doesn't have to look like the out-of-the-box version. There's nothing wrong with the out-of-the-box version. But when it comes to intranets, I really believe that a successful intranet will reflect the company's culture. In addition to adhering to the brand guidelines and all that kind of thing. So I think it can be functional as well as beautiful. So when we came up with some concepts for Homer, we really had spent a lot of work understanding who they are, what they do as a business. We came up with a couple of concepts. I think you saw the final version earlier in Matt's slides. Thank you.
All right. So basically, you heard the story from PSA, how they're using the site, and you also heard the story from Nikki. And I just want to cover two key aspects from my perspective that I see. If you just had these two done really well, you will always have a successful rollout, from my experience. And firstly, from a business perspective, and secondly, from a technical perspective of if someone was building it for you. So from working with other clients and working with other people, one of the things is to have your goal definition and executive alignment right up front. And what does that actually mean? It's identifying your key objectives and the impact it's going to have to your staff by rolling out a platform or rolling out intranet. Objectives might be collaboration, communication, process improvement, and business impact would be employee productivity. So, I mean, look for opportunities to improve your business productivity for employees because it's an intranet. Robust governance, I mean, I can't stress how important this is because, you know, having a governance group and having governance for your intranet is really important, not only for your rollout, but for future rollouts and enhancements and changes. Yes?
Can you wrap it up with your governance?
Yeah.
What kind of content do you have in your governance?
Sorry?
What do you have in your governance?
What do we have in our governance? Well, first of all, you need to have the people, right? So we would have the stakeholder group or the sponsor from the business, a couple of key people who are driving the intranet project from the business, as well as from ourselves, we would have a couple of key people as the governance group. The next step would be to meet. You have to have a regular meeting like once in 3 months or once in 2 months, whichever the project demands. That would then say, what are the policies? So for an example, I'll give you an example. Before you start, some organizations will demand and say, our governance group's policy is that you will not do any customization on this implementation. So that if that's written down as a policy, then we have to think, how do we enable the users for the requirements that they want from out-of-the-box stuff? Okay? Now, there are some other organizations which will say, we don't mind if it's giving us really high business value, like Matt talked about the leave part, web part, you can't do that out of the box. So then you talk about that, you know, if it's giving you high value, then you might say, okay, certain things you can customize and put as part of the, so it becomes, the governance group is the one who makes those kind of decisions which are really critical to basically, you know, implement things and move forward, yeah? And it goes right down to what type of document management, what structure, you know, all those things, what kind of security, everything else that you want. Because if you just leave it to the IS manager to decide, like we talked before, you know, they just decide on their own and they'll sometimes either lock it too much or open it too much and you have other problems afterwards. Yeah? To answer that? Yeah, cool. Yeah, roadmap for early success. So when we go through the process of designing a site and talking to the users, by having open questions, we try and tease out a couple of things that we think are really simple things to do that's going to give you early success. And what that would do is actually get the buzz in your organization. So, you know, you get people using it, you get people, you know, involved in it, so suddenly they get engaged in it. So again, I'm harping on this leave web part, but just, you know, a couple of things that we did for PSA was to get people engaged in there and then to create the buzz for the intranet, right? The other thing is inclusive approach top-down. So we always want to have, you know, surveys sent out to people. We can have interviews for execs because they won't sometimes have the time to fill in surveys. So you might have an interview with the execs, but for some of the staff, you might send out surveys and get something back. So we need to do that. The other thing is communicating change, because a lot of the organizations talk about intranet as a platform and as a technical implementation. From my perspective, it is not a technical implementation. It is not. It is a change program for your organization. So the moment you start on an intranet, that's the change, and it has to evolve year in, year out. If you don't do it, if you implement something this year and you don't do anything for another year, your usage, if you take your usage graph, it's going to go this way. So it is a change program. It's supported by technology, it's supported by your platform, but it is a program. So you have to get your execs and your governance group to buy into that idea, which means you might have rollouts every year, or you might refresh every 3 years. Something, something that's, been agreed upon. Technology, I mean, a lot of people, put so much focus on technology, and we are here on the SharePoint conference, so I have to talk about SharePoint. But what I can say is don't sweat on the technology, because technology is an enabler, and it will do whatever it will do. 2013 SharePoint, fantastic product. I can't say less than that. But the focus should be from a business, what is the requirements? How do we enable the users using SharePoint in 2013 as a platform? So that's where, so technology, and you must base your technology based on the ROI that you're going to get back. So a lot of people think, oh, what is an ROI on the SharePoint intranet? Well, that's for the business to come up with. That will be part of the objectives before you start a project. And sometimes it's just time, reducing a leave process of this paper-based that took 3 days to 3 hours. Well, that's great if you can do that. So, deciding on those things is critical. So I'll just put this as purely from a business perspective. When you start a project, it's really good to sit down, take that time, and write some of these things down so everybody knows what you're trying to achieve. And because we come from a technology company and we are responsible for deploying intranets to our clients, I have to talk a little bit about what we do as well as a process, because we could say we're just, turning the switch on and you have an intranet. No, it doesn't work that way, sorry. But if for us as a technology company, managing the changes that come through once your intranet is implemented is key. And if you can track them through and have some system, whatever your system, you can have a issues register or a change register on your intranet to manage this. You could have a separate system, doesn't really matter. But the key fact is that you are having some change management and you are doing it properly. Requesting the change is also important, because if you just do everything that the user requests, and because he's laughing there, yes, you might be going through some of this, your intranet just goes out of control and there's no real focus as to what you're trying to do. So yes, get all the requests, don't block anybody out, but there has to be some filtering mechanism to make sure business value of what you're doing, all right? Source control, well, we again, Microsoft, and we do everything from a Microsoft platform. So Team Foundation server is one of our best buddies, never lets us down. We have a source control in there. We can deploy. If the client calls and says, my server is fried, we can deploy, immediately if for some reason their backup is not working. So everything is packaged up and deployed properly. So there is no, no way to sort of say, oh, we're actually getting part of their, implementation. Yeah. Build automation. Why is build automation important? Because it takes up high-end developers' time. So if you have a really good developers who are senior developers who want to be doing fun stuff and doing really good stuff, don't ask them to do deployments by hand. Yeah? So what we need to do is to automate those mundane tasks that is taking up your really high value resources. So if we can, there are several tools, TFS again, but there's several tools who can do this. And if you can do that, then your deployments are much more easier but manageable. But also the business, from a business perspective, gets more confidence in what you deploy. So therefore, they will ask for changes, and you can deploy those changes without any problems, and they'll see those coming through. Yeah. And I've just touched on the next one, to manage your deployments carefully. And we follow all of the Microsoft best practices because we have to, no, because we don't want any headaches later on. So we would follow all of the practices, and we make sure the deployment packages that we deploy deployed correctly in the client's environment. So I just wanted to bring it back from our perspective, from a vendor perspective. This is what we do when we embark on an intranet. And like Matt touched on it, they were on 2010, and we've upgraded to 2013. And as part of the upgrade, it gives you that opportunity to refresh. And again, that's a governance question. Is it a simple upgrade? Or when you upgrade versions, would you stop and think about your refresh? Because time moves on. 3 years. Do you use 2010 for 3 years? Yeah, 2010 for 3 years. So they've been using it for 3 years. It didn't look like this. It looks something different. And so you get an opportunity to refresh it. But if that, from a governance perspective, that's not discussed, what might have happened is we would have just gone straight upgrade from 2010 to 2013. Yes, you get a new platform, you get some new features, but you don't get a new, funky-looking site and that kind of stuff. So just want to leave you with those thoughts. And basically, going back to the home page, so we've ended up with that site by following that process with the design phase and the build phase and deployments and everything. And with a lot of help from PSA and some of the users, that's what we ended up with. So hopefully that's given you a bit of a flavor. So that's us. That's our contact details if you want to get in touch with us. We'll hang around here for 5-10 minutes. I know we were probably thinking of having a drink very soon. Have question time. I think we've got 5 minutes for questions according to the schedule, and then we'll hang around here as well for a little while. Wow, questions. Yeah.
I'm just interested to know what your next plans for improvement are.
So for us, there is actually more workflows going into that agreement area because we've seen so much promise from that when it comes to trends analysis. That's a big area for us. Those collective agreements go off to Vic University and Department of Labour, and they do their own analysis on it. And in the past, we've relied on their analysis, which takes up to 18 months to get any sort of picture of what's going on industrially. So if we can do that in-house using something as simple as what is a document library, that's something that we'll keep pursuing. So that's probably the next thing that we'll develop further. Yeah.
Someone else had a question. So I'll just take one from the back and come back to you.
What would you do differently next time?
We talked about this question actually, funnily enough. So you get a prize for it. Come and pick up whatever you like. What would I do different next time? Possibly, the only thing I would say in this implementation is probably not much from a process perspective. I'll still follow the same, but possibly have a little bit more user engagement from PSA. So we would probably want maybe a slightly bigger group, or we would ask for, could we please have, a bit more. But purely from a process perspective, I wouldn't change this. This is proven to me over 10, 12 implementations, so I'm quite happy with it. Toyota New Zealand is one of our biggest ones, so that's the same process. EIT, sitting over here, same process. So yeah. You another question?
Usually in your document management,
Yeah.
We have issue with document sorting. We spend a lot of time
Yeah.
to get the taxonomy right.
Yeah.
So what you have done.
Yeah.
We migrate your legacy document to SharePoint. So what
Document.
kind of sorting do you have? What kind of taxonomy do you have?
Yeah, so for our SharePoint, we don't really use it for document management other than those agreements, but we do have a control form with metadata to upload them. So we can do filtering by sectors, by the organisers to employers, but other than that agreements library, we don't actually use it yet.
So you don't have like a content types?
No.
But just coming back, in other implementations, we have done that. So you can put content types, you can put stuff and structure it in a way that when you upload certain documents, you have to fill in certain things and then use that. And then we can also use workflow. For example, if your policy is that, documents have to be reviewed every 3 months, or documents have to be reviewed every 6 months, and then a new version published, you can have workflows that kick in and remind users to do that. Yeah? Yes?
What's your business model for content management? Do you have content managers, and would you have site administrators who can manipulate how the intranet looks and feels?
I'll just answer that and then come back to Matt from a PSA. But from a generalist perspective, it depends on the organization, right? Just giving you a couple of examples of my clients, Fitirea Polytechnic in Porora. Their website is on SharePoint. We built that, so you go and have a look at their website, fitirea.ac.nz. Now, for them, they have, for every faculty, they have content managers. Same with EIT, you got content managers for every faculty? Yes. So they would be responsible for updating content, but not too much of the site structure, and not too much of, because they're busy, they're BAU, as part of their BAU, they are updating content as well. So we try to make it as easy as possible for these people who now suddenly have to do an extra task to do the content. But the key thing is to get the content in there and keep it updated. From PSA's perspective?
I just wanted to say that you mentioned look and feel as well. What we do is we create page templates so that there will be consistency of look and feel across the intranet.
And
Not every end user could move web parts or
Well, we have a sort of WinTech approach to this. I guess if anyone was in that session, I'm generally the admin, and as Nikki said, we do have page templates, and within those templates you can actually move web parts around, and our web parts are pretty much locked down. People know how to make lists, document libraries, and those set web parts that I've shown you today, they can drag them into any page that they want if they find it necessary. Whole of our organisation can put content wherever they want. The only time I hear from people is when they break it, which is pretty much the WinTech model. So,
I just wanted to highlight just one. I mean, my favorite thing there is any user can go and tag pages. So we provide just simple things like that. So when you go to the homepage, your homepage will look different from another one. So the idea is there that you would tag a page or a link or whatever that you use every day. So it's only a one click away.
So where is the information stored?
It's all SharePoint, so it's a list.
Each
So,
user might have different favorites.
yes, so it's as long as you can get to it from here. So it could be an external website, it could be an internal link, it could be a document library, it could be a picture library, it could be whatever in your internet. But the key thing here is you might have to go, for example, operational information underneath there. There's a menu, you click there, you go somewhere else, and that's the page you're interested in, right?
Yeah,
So
how do they add the current page to the favorites?
it's just a link list.
there's a link, yeah.
On my side.
No, it's not my site. It's part of the intranet as well. It's separate to my site.
So
Yeah.
you have a single disk to hold all the favorites for all the users.
Yeah, but it's for you. It knows which ones to show for you. Yeah. So it's just customizing a little bit. Yeah.
How many site collections and sites, and what platform are we talking about?
I am so glad I have my team sitting here because I wouldn't know the answer for that. Do we know how many site collections?
Probably we have about 2 site collections and 15 to 20 sites.
Yeah.
And is it an internal or online?
Online. Yeah, this is on.
Oh, this is on-premise. This is on-premise. Yeah.
What HR system are you using, and how easy was it to integrate it with SharePoint?
Sorry, what was that?
Like you've mentioned that your HR system is integrated with some web parts. Like
That's right.
Linkpad. So what HR system are you using?
The HR system is Fusion 5, and I'm not sure. I think that publishes that to SQL, and then SharePoint interrogates the SQL from that.
Yeah.
And that's pretty straightforward. One of the challenges we've got, and answering your question from earlier about what's next, our membership database is Sybase, and Sybase is very difficult to talk to anything unless you go to SQL and then interrogate that, and that's going to be another challenge for us as well.
And your HR system, is it also integrated with user profiles?
Not currently. No, but maybe that's something that we'll look at. One of the challenges for us is that the HR system is owned by finance, the intranet is owned by communications, the AD is owned by IT, and so marrying up those people and having maybe some of that governance that Stickney talked about and everyone pulling in the same direction.
Was that a question you asked about user profiles?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, so it depends on again, that's why I stress the fact that it has to be a policy of the organization that the user profiles are synced up with your Active Directory. And someone is going to make sure the Active Directory is correct first, which normally is IT, which should be IT, and then SharePoint will take care of the rest. We've got an example, a very good example. Talk to these guys from EIT. They had a project that they did before doing SharePoint, is to get all their Active Directory sorted, including taking pictures of everybody and all that kind of stuff. So talk to them if you want to know more about that kind of stuff.
I know about it.
Yeah.
Integration is active, it's not a problem for us.
Yeah.
The problem what we encountered that IT people do tend to leave lots of accounts in the AD for various reasons.
That's
They
right.
don't remove straight away and so on.
We've got a heap of contractors who have helped us do various projects over the years.
That's why from the business perspective,
Sure.
Ideally, we would like to have profiles integrated with the HR system.
Yeah.
So where HR guys will be looking after the contact details,
Yeah.
reporting line and so on, but we found that with our new HR system,
Yeah.
our old one was really well integrated, but the new ones, they're really concerned about the securities and they don't want to integrate it, and that's a problem. Because users are not good in updating anything in the profile.
Everything in our
Absolutely. This should come just from one place, I agree. I'm aware of time. I think we'll finish it there. Thank you. If you want to have any more questions, please come up. We'll be standing here for a little while. But thank you very much for your time, and I hope it's been useful for you. Thank you.
Please steal the books and cups and T-shirts that are left. Otherwise, I have to go back in my